can just flash.
Okay.
Unless email is easier. I don't know. I don't know if we all have access to it.
It's fine.
Somewhere. Do you both have it?
Yeah.
Alright. Is anyone not ready? Plan the Export-Import Bank of the United States should offer substantial financing for non-corn biofuels in Mexico. Advantage 1 is sex and warming safe, genetic activity, and the most common purpose of analysis from nature and human activity is causing global warming. Surveys strong agreement 98% regarding AGW and publishing comment experts agreement has steadily increased among global climate change papers that say the position on AGW. We find 97% endorsements. There's a gap between perception and reality. Contributing to this, our campaign is designed to confuse the public. A systematic, comprehensive review literature provides evidence supporting the number of papers rejecting AGW is decreasing over time, and there's a low threshold for runaway warming. Newest studies prove gold black 13. We present the most complete study of runaway greenhouse. There has been high-profile speculation and anthropogenic change contributed, but this is contrary to existing theory. Previous work suggested that thermal radiation limit does not depend on GHGs, but this is not correct. Deglaciation might trigger runaway greenhouse source features analogous to Venus's spot. Runaway greenhouse might be easier to initiate than previously thought. In adherence to existing multilateral agreements avoids 4-degree warming. Anything higher is catastrophic. Hence, 40-degree scenarios are devastating. Malnutrition, heat waves, water scarcity, cyclones, irreversible loss of biodiversity, 4-degree will comes with high uncertainty and new risks. The scientists and uncritical humans of causing global warming should pledge little 3-degree warming. The longer those pledges remain unmet, the more likely a 4-degree world becomes. What are the implications? It's hard to describe. A 4-degree world can and must be avoided. International agreements and increasing climate financing affect everything. And extinction amounts of time without a severe reduction in emissions effects of climate change are likely to be catastrophic. Climate change could undermine economies, brown safe failing, collapse in developing countries, don't mitigate climate change could pose an existential threat to civilization. There's no precedent for such rapid change in climatic conditions, and Congress has requested an increase in green financing, but the Export-Import Bank has fallen short. Increasing financing is key to climate leadership, Pacific environment, while banks fossil fuel financing under council bonds pledges to advance U.S. climate change related dramatic events or products, and bank failed to meet the congressional directive to allocate 10% of annual financing to renewable energy. And banks should redirect public financing to the fast-growing renewable energy sector related to climate change and spurring sustainable job growth and quickening the distribution of clean tech and greening. The bank is key, creates momentum for multilateral climate agreements. Going 6, the bank is responsible for cutting emissions, banks for most unique systems of products and expertise to develop onto the needs of development. What it continues to be tension between economic and environmental protection equity should be the touchdown relations. Argued their own reductions will not produce gains for developing nations, and also agrees that the bank is a public agency in a developed country must be doing business as a developing country is a unique opportunity to justify its extreme policy to reduce its own emissions while maintaining export financing of clean energy benefits and engage in developing countries. The bank's change in reduction policy would press other credit export agencies to undertake similar measures. Its role as a leader afforded the political capital necessary to pursue widespread adoption of GHG reduction policies and independently increasing green access financing is key to clean tech primacy. Hertz 13. Exxon provides only policy support for renewable energy in 2012, but provided less than 1% of its total financing, despite Congress directing it to allocate 10%. Rebalancing Exxon to portfolio to reduce fossil fuel investment and ramp up support for clean tech would have enormous benefits for climate and the U.S. economy. Clean energy exports create more jobs. Support for clean energy exports is essential for American competitiveness. Exports drive down domestic costs. The message to Exxon is clear, and green leadership solves counterbalancing, specifically from Russia and China, climate but not adjust climate change. The U.S. is wanting an opportunity to secure its global primacy, use social and innovation to escape becoming meltdown, developing tech to allow the U.S. to have new potential great power rivals in place as the hegemon. American hegemony seems to be facing rivals competition for oil is fueling animosity between major powers. Oil is involved in Russia and China in a nasty zero-sum contest, which threatens primacy and global stability. If the U.S. is to produce tech that allows the society to escape the oil trap, that will give the U.S. a tremendous economic boom while providing leverage that can keep potential foes in check. And Russia-China counterbalancing leads to great power conflicts. Blank 9. The greatest security threat to American interests will be Russia-Chinese alliance. The alliance will become resistance to U.S. interests abroad. Whereas in Asia, resistance to anti-proliferation ideological counteroffensive against democratization abroad and rearming with the veto of conflicts such as the situation will bring a huge wave of shock to the Korean Peninsula. The Sino-Russian energy nexus would support China's growing claims to regional preeminence. Russia's threat to China would have severe military implications to an anti-American scenario. Advantage 2 is Mexico. Post-NAFTA agricultural corrections will collapse the Mexican economy. U.S. biofuel investment is key to solve. Result 9. Mexican resources gain. The future Mexican area will depend on advances. These will only result from FDI. The Mexican economy might not be able to agriculture will benefit from the outfits of northern area. U.S. assistance should consist of aid any investment. Any income lost in the Mexican market will be recouped by harvesting biomass. Permitting U.S. firms to operate on Mexican lands and hence Mexican efficiency and profitability, while facilitating land ownership for the Mexican farm. FDF in the U.S. should supply ag tech biofuel facilities and infrastructure to transport ethanol. Mexican collapse stops critical diplomatic capital had a gate. Failing state to present chronic problems sent by Mexico and chaos would demand an American response to collapse would have enormous security implications to the U.S. The U.S. would have little ability to focus serious attention on much else in the world. There would be no running from a Mexican collapse, and that leads to Asian wars. Limit 13, which argue to lose influence. The U.S. is indispensable for peace on the diplomatic side. The U.S. is the closest thing in Asia to an honest broker. National tensions in Asia are not going to change, and these wars escalate. Mean 10. Our destinies is inextricably linked with Asia's failures will reverberate. The ignorance of Cuba and survive the most mutually hostile states. India, Pakistan, the states most likely to threaten each other with nukes. North Korea and Iran, the two superpowers with a billion plus people. The world's most explosive territorial disputes are in Asia, and independently, Mexican oil-dependent economy is unsustainable. Mexico collapses U.S.-Mexico relations. Mellon de Leon 9. Energy scenario where the U.S. and Mexican economies are interlinked. Mexico's oil industry suffers. Mexico's largest oil field is in decline. Mexico's connection to oil makes partnering with foreign companies politically impossible. Declining oil production will spell an economic crisis, which would reverberate in the U.S. economy. Vitality Mexico's energy sector is crucial to the bilateral relationship, and a new biofuel alliance is key. Morales 11. Tech extraction award diversified mix of energy with non-conventional and renewable fuels are critical. Become much more important. Mexico's assets have moved to a critical pivot. This will directly impact the U.S. Mexican exports decline. This will negatively impact Mexico's economic opportunities. Intensify tensions in the bilateral relationship. Mexico has the potential of shaping biofuels to escape nationalistic governance of conventional resources, and specifically in export-import partnerships spill over into the broader relationship. Donnelly 10. Energy and climate are good entry points for growing as Mexican dollar finance needs for renewables are felt on both sides of the border. As used companies suffer from a lack of export-import financing and relations solve organized crime and drug networks. Wilson 9. The U.S. relationship with Mexico is vital to this time of great opportunity, but always challenges. DTOs have lucrative and deadly cross-border trade that creates significant vulnerabilities for both countries that penetrated the institutional framework of the Mexican state. Policymakers have shared interests in working together to develop comprehensive bilateral approach that limits the reach of organized crime. Latin American money laundering operations create strategic alliances between Russian organized crime and regional organizations. Fair 10. Members by Russian organized crime and money laundering have been noted in return for their cooperation. Russian groups are allowed to operate the strategic alliances in Latin America, providing domestic criminal groups with access to illicit international markets and illegal arms sources that can bring them into serious disability. Consequence could be the increased presence of Russian organized crime in the U.S. will be a logical step in their expansion. And organized crime presents the greatest risk of nuclear smuggling. Says Steve Van Hand, free trafficking drugs is well suited to nuclear smuggling. This by avoiding detection. Safe routes by corrupt authorities can be utilized for trafficking in nuclear material. New terrorist organizations would not hesitate to use WMDs, including nuclear. Russian organized crime groups, Al-Qaeda organized crime groups in Russia could supply the terrorists with nuclear material. Ties success rate nuclear smuggling. Organized crime groups were interested in the acquisition of nuclear material. They'd be able to find a well-positioned insider and bribe or intimidate him into stealing it for them. And nuclear terrorism causes global nuclear escalation. Morgan 9. Terrorists already know the best way to escalate tensions to nuclear exchange. All militant terrorists have to do is get their hands on one bomb and explode it because of the Russian hand. Any attack would be on the U.S. If Israel were to suffer a nuclear attack, it would retaliate with the same option. Tens of thousands of warheads would rain upon most of the cities in the northern hemisphere. Radioactive clouds would bring death to future generations that could last 100 years. And advantage 3 is agriculture. Mexican production transitions the U.S. away from corn. Ethanol, donor 9. Ethanol from sugar is better than corn production. Ethanol does not pressure on global food. Sugar is feasible to facilities could easily constructed alongside sugar mills. Mexico holds competitive advantages. Sugar surplus small amount could be diverted to biomass production migrates to Mexico. The U.S. contributes some facilities to cellulose materials. Feedstocks could be grown efficiently. Do not shape food supplies. Diversification from crop ethanol avoids monoculture. Native species require less irrigation. These crops avoid diverse effects on global markets while contributing to the revitalization of farmland. And that leads to sustainable farming / food trade-offs. McDonald 9. Restoring farming in Mexico will jobs in the American ethanol industry. Mexico jobs cost down, easing the pressure on U.S. corn and reducing demand for global food. As demand for U.S. corn follows farmers implement sustainable practices. And the impact is global food shocks. Why is 12 billion between half prices and the rest is well documented. Have debate how much price increases should be blamed on biofuels for the contribution of small ethanol consumers. 40% of U.S. corn farmers increased production, but not enough to accommodate increased demand. So prices kept rising in South Africa, and corn is a staple grain for 1 billion people. LDCs have gone from exporters to huge net importers. Poor consumers are most hurt by ethanol price increases, and a diversity of studies confirm that corn biofuels are the key internal link to global food shocks. Price 12, 17 studies expose them between biofuel production and higher food prices. There's little doubt that biofuels play a key role in the corn price variability, which spilled over into other commodity markets. And biofuel induced shocks kill a billion people. Run since now 7. Biofuels have devastating effects on prices of basic food. Projected increases might be mitigated if ethanol based on other raw materials becomes viable. Biofuels exacerbate world hunger. Prices of all staples go up. They're left with no alternative. The number of food insecure people would rise by over 16 million for every percentage increase in the prices. 1.2 billion people could be chronically hungry. Many more will die from disease and food shocks. Escalate to all-out warfare. 12. Fires and food prices lead to widespread and conflict. Affordable food is essential to human survival. People could be desperate and angry to survive starvation. State class conflicts of various sort, including full-scale war, could prove deadly from billions of famished people, and the impact is extinction. Round 9 with such global stability to crisis to cause government class civilization could disintegrate political tensions, force the breakdowns of governments and society. Such collapse as possible. The food price of facing food stress on governments already too economy and chaos. Entire nations will break down manufacturing, international security, failing states, their source of terrorist drugs, welfare and refugees. If the system for controlling infectious diseases breaks down, many will be in trouble. Once states fail, their fall will threaten the stability of global civilization. Yeah.
Define me diplomatic capital.
Diplomatic capital?
Yep.
So I guess it would be the ability to focus like diplomatic efforts on one place at like a certain amount of places at one time.
Your Loman evidence is in the context of U.S. military presence in Asia. How does diplomacy trade off with sort of hard power?
Yeah. Our Lohman evidence indicates that if Mexico were to collapse, that would that would take all of our diplomatic capital away from Asia, which is actually necessary to quell
diplomacy
territorial
is obviously distinct from military. We're pivoting to Asia in this one.
Right, but we're also having diplomatic forces in Asia in order to encourage peace agreements between people who are fighting over different territories.
Where does your Lohman evidence say the word diplomacy?
Where does the Lohman evidence say diplomacy? It says on the diplomatic side, the U.S. is the closest thing in Asia to an honest broker.
Okay, fair enough. Mexico's oil-dependent economy is unsustainable. Your evidence seems to talk about a lack of constitutional reforms, which leads to declining production. Does it assume reforms in the status quo?
You're right. It doesn't assume status quo reforms. However, the nature of oil itself being a finite resource means that they can't rely on that forever. It's better
to. What does it say?
Well, I mean, I think everyone in this room can recognize that oil is finite. There's only a certain amount of it. They need to switch over to a biofuel alliance in the long term to cooperate with the U.S.
I don't think your evidence backs that, but sure.
Well, also, Pemex can't cooperate with the U.S. over energy
solve
resources
organized
right
crime. How come Merida doesn't solve in the status quo?
Our evidence indicates that Merida is not sufficient to, fight organized crime because you have to stop the actual transfer of money that's going between these drug trafficking organizations and organized crime in Russia. Because
how does a biofuel alliance solve illicit financial flows?
Because our evidence indicates that if you solve for Mexico's economy, or improve relations, between the U.S. and Mexico, that will be sufficient to transfer resources away from the drug trade and boost their economy in other areas.
So long as your key internal link relies upon illicit financial flows, why does that disincentivize WMD acquisition? I don't understand the internal link.
Yeah, so our FARA evidence says that right now there's money going between regional organized crime groups in Russia and drug trafficking organizations. If you're able to cut off that flow of money, you can also stop the acquisition of nuclear weapons.
But it says terrorists are linked with drug cartels. That's
what I just said. Drug trafficking organizations.
That doesn't stop terrorist presence. Okay, that's fine.
They can't get a weapon if you cut off the trade flow between those two places.
The McDonald evidence, sustainable farming. How does this solve ethanol production? Your McDonald evidence is in the context of more sustainable farming, but it's not in the context of corn being produced to substitute for ethanol.
No, we're not saying that corn should be produced. You have it backwards. We're saying that corn is being produced right now that decimated the Mexican agricultural industry. We need to shift away from corn biofuels to produce something more sustainable for Mexico.
Yeah, I know, but I'm saying your internal link evidence doesn't support that. It doesn't say
that
it does.
The whole third advantage is about corn production being really, really bad for everyone.
6 advantage. Could I get the vision? Let me know when you have it. Okay, anybody not ready? All right. First off is the counterpart in the United States. Congress should refuse to reauthorize the Export-Import Bank's authority to offer substantial financing for non-core biofuels in Mexico on the basis of delegation doctrine. The United States Congress should use its power of the purse authority to pass legislation that offers substantial financing for non-core biofuels in Mexico. It competes. The F uses the Exim Bank to offer financing. The counterpart has Congress ban that authority and passes legislation to do it. It's legitimate. The F puts the agent in the plan and gets a strategic reward for doing it. They should have to incur the strategic cost. Exim Bank authority crushes United States global competitors. That turns the case Williams In 14, the export import bank puts U.S. companies at a competitive disadvantage, pricing them out of the market, loads up to the billions in profits along foreign companies to price the price of undermine the competition. Action bank operations jeopardize the ability of U.S. firms to compete. Congress should repeal shelter altogether. Action bank should not continue to put the foreign companies head next office. Applicability interpretation. Economic engagement must be government to government. Crocker and Obama masters the terms of engagement. Talking with adversaries defined. Engagement does require direct ties violation. The plan only operates through a bank. It doesn't mandate your government to government interaction. Voting issue first of limits. Requiring direct talks place a functional limit on the topic because UMass can defend the process. Specific import cases can't beat the pick out of talks control in the next research grid. Second is ground. There are talks for stable mechanism for dealings and competition for conditions for counterplans like two-track required diplomacy. Coordinate ground is key to fairness. Next office is critique economic engagement forces Latin America into a straitjacket. Itself can compete in the big imperialistic game. Global forces make extinction and never vote negative to align yourself against the affirmist colonial politics. Rivera in South America has risen up to be able to resist the market policies into the use of forced militarism and the limitation of liberty in the context of economic release in the form of solidarity based upon the virgin consciousness to protect their common heritage. We need your help. Such declaration should not be understood as appeals for resisting contemporary the movements are resisting pressure to neoliberalism. Is immoral that justifies evil and never will sacrifice the history of globalization. Historians are understanding the rest of the world seems ready to listen. Next off is the politics that Obama's push is making NSA agreements converge about current political momentum. Is key Samus and Sherman in 4-9 they need to move the NSA bill quickly, otherwise the concerns about the government's surveillance to bring to the bills of and NSA however bills become trackers or amendments voting on NSA while stopping the opposition legislation seeking NSA reform should get a boost when the White House endorsed the proposal. The greater Sherman will be the president. White House can play a stall game if they play. They'll end up with nothing. The proposal continue to pick up support. There's a heavy political lift. NAFTA proves the plan will be a popular Villarreal. In Ferguson 13, NAFTA was controversial. The FTA evolved into developing countries developing country political debate was divisive. Proponents argument for the agreement would help generate opponents agreement arguing huge job losses. That's key to NSA authority. Sasso in 13 Obama realized no choice to negotiate. Congress failed to reauthorize the provision. Then NSA's collection of records would end entirely outraged by Senator means that NSA supporters would almost certainly lose an outdown vote on the program. Sunset would force the law because of the bargain to believe momentum. The officials seem to holding around a framework. The question far from settling is backing up the outside groups will continue policy push. European backlash over NSA devastates the alliance we seal. In 13, the NSA's connections to companies, European connections, and politics of the discriminated American business and the backlash is threatening the pushing the other aspects. The revelations of the spying and the is also threatening and sweeping free trade agreements. Many U.S. companies would have effectively been able to operate in Europe if they were reachable by European law. NSA could extend beyond the diplomatic sphere and damage U.S. economic interest. Stops Eurasian nuclear war extinction. Brzezinski and the most volatile region with the social potential to plunge the world into chaos. Eurasia, America could side in a coalition with Islam. The North problems would be the open seas intensifying regional violence and the proliferation of WMDO. Not only Europe has capability, political, military, and economic problems to pursue jointly the task of engaging Eurasia. Next up is Mexico politics. It will pass, but NATO's push is key to overcoming opposition dire. In 4 years, their NATO formed the political consensus around the forms that will certainly be challenges from the challenging opposite of labor unions, political opponents, with companies who feel they're better now. The hurdles, political arenas, Mexico Congress are far divided than it was a year ago. The plan is controversial, hyper-nationalism star in back to Americanism, entrepreneurs, Mexican nationalism, powerful impediment to U.S. interference in Mexico. Mexico's hyper-sensitive to the U.S. and might be trying. The Congress would pro to demand the U.S. forces to Mexico also sells oil dependency. In 13, Mexico is currently the world's largest oil producer, energy from raising production to 3 million. The U.S. would most likely benefit beneficiary of Mexico oil whips in the fields are closed. Sources of experts on the chain would produce U.S. dependence from OPEC oil adventures and causing extinction alignment and 7 with energy found in the U.S. heavily dependent on import security for American means ensuring the supply of what we can do without a waging wars. Ecological recognize that the U.S. willing to withdraw in the Middle East, like in Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, other states more than oil. Let's see, planet Earth, there's no second chance. There may be nothing left of the wake of nuclear holocaust. We'll read the next set of this case. Turn climate leadership leads to emissions cuts. News mass in 12 that Obama's putting the climate change requiring emissions cuts. Obama is working on policy presence laying the foundations by the time he decides to jump the international arena. 190 nations are working that would lead to emissions. The U.S. is much stronger than countries in China hide behind the perception U.S. inaction would always take away the excuse of the U.S. action being stalled because the U.S. debt violates the WTO cost of production. Rifkin in 9 attempting to enforce the emission reduction would be problematic and must rely on trade penalties. Illegal under WTO rules. The countries that have already denounced the carbon tariffs. The carbon tariff is production of tariffs would be under challenge climate protections would carry on the negative consequences of production. The countries would retaliate. Trade would be impaired. Attempts to pursue the other countries would also complicate relations with regard to the cooperation. Other concerns the impact is trade war past there in the call for curbs and trade rules for the production of legislation. The dangerous confrontation never come out of serious which will give rise to military counters with minimal provocation and condition will encourage the injection of the rogue nation. The age-old culture will take on new kinds of emergency. China will assume the immediate increasingly revolution posture towards Taiwan. May colonize the Middle East and Israel may look to draw an allies from around the world into conflicts. No impact to warming adaptation solves Mendelssohn and on the immediate impact to society. Alarmist and misleading extremely low probability. Catastrophic consequences science and economic choice. Really the mission will lead to mild consequences severe. Impacts require century of no mitigation. Predicted impacts require that no adaptation. People will adapt policies and new development the toward the long range. Commerce warming is slow and not real. Taylor and 11 NASA satellite data for 20 I'm sure the Earth's atmosphere is allowing Earth to be released in space. All huge discrepancy with the data forecast the atmosphere being shutting into space before the one predicted findings to dramatically alter the global warming debate. One objective NASA satellite data shows a huge discrepancy between alarmist models and real world facts. Scientists would be wise to take notice. Multi-lateral cooperation is inevitable. Fails forewarns Young et al. In 13 global cooperation is gridlock or multiplicity number 6 increased by 300%. States matters have suspended the consequences of many countries representing a diverse interest must agree on the institutional order global order. Suggests agreements of privilege privileges, the country more wealthy, power shifts the regional participation is needed, the harder problems is independence is even the problems that also while negotiating trade agreements requires a host of social, environmental, and cultural subjects by which countries often share religions agree sheer complexity incentives made the global deal, and possible fragmentation efforts to cooperate currently dense institutional ecosystem paths dependency, no Russia-China alliance geography, Japan, in China, Russia, another financial party geography, dictates national sharply limited against interest China, Russia, are becoming more powerful, creating ample likelihood of the worthy confrontation advantage, to no escalation to Asia, Kabayashi, Ari, in 13 Asia, Pacific, intensified trade, and security for new institutions, Asia's contribution to management and new resolution to Kabayas, first adherence to Asian norms, eliminate the possibility of any serious military escalation, these create a structure contribute to diffusing tension. The TASC is unarmed agreement committee members of the peaceful counter DIPCAP is bogus in 11 the Pentagon is eclipse of the State Department of U.S. foreign policy for the capability of nations diplomatic and foreign agencies to arrest the diminished the ambassador USA officials are going to fixtures of the contractors they settled with the chronic sabotaging and endured language and immoral tons of numbers NSA Syria Iran and Ukraine all trade diplomatic capital political institution checking stability call in 12 not long ago Latin America was synonymous with instability developments in Latin America's research and political institution maturity and democratic practices after the military retreated from the policy they were on the coups in the 1980s the past decades where there was only one short trade it's declining but stable WHA in 628 drug killings have decreased the drop in 80% compared with the previous 6 months however former intelligence officials said the declining is flat now the situation is improving relations are resilient overcomes small issues shift during 13 Mexico and the U.S. have strong relationships trading partners and millions of U.S. are freeing Mexico to truth resulting in collaborations unprecedented commitment to consolidate the balance over relations if there's no internal link to cartels from terrorism Ramsey told the politician continue to build Hezbollah influence in Latin America Hezbollah is notorious support relies on the tribal region to show the support is largely financial Hezbollah is not actively directly trying to criminal enterprises there is scarce evidence for allegation the group is developing political contention no risk of nuclear terrorism Max Sharmer 14 U.S. as a terrorist bombs a minor threat another attack is highly likely to happen in its single over the past few years the possibility that terrorists might attain a nuclear weapon are no state is going to survive because they have too much control of the terminal there are seeing an obstacle to material of the bigger obstacle to delivering nuclear terrorism is not a serious threat now advantage 2 Alt cause, Cuba standard as well. The Cuban government is considered large-scale ethanol producer and sugar cane acres. The investment opportunities are about to open up close to 2 billion gallons of ethanol per year. So does Brazil, Israel, and 12 Brazilian billion allows to produce sugar in Cuba. Those restrictions on foreign investment allow the capital start Cuban industry to allow foreign influence to produce ethanol for sugar cane. Cuba is opening the possibility of producing ethanol for the energy generation, developing an ethanol standard where Cuba will take time since most of the land was abandoned. Food shortage doesn't cause moral luge. In 11, the empirical studies announced with the argument saying that the capital will increase the productivity of humankind to increase the new sources that seem a challenge below our 16 years of water and food insecurity with the wars. The Middle East and foreign ministries use to none of the Pharisees and issues because of the cause of war. 80% of incidents were limited right up 2/3 of all the cooperative scale. 8% of water drives the cooperation to water wars and not making sense in the light of recent historical record no impact of failed states. Patrick in 11 failed states are relevant in index of ranking developing nations have examined whether or not the ranking revealed anything about global terrorism is standing with Al-Qaeda. Times be one of the difficulties working under case of the national security, financial infrastructure, defusing movement, and also called to Paris. That card's at Paris.
Okay, what's the status of the advocacies?
Conditional.
What's not benefit to the counterpart?
Politics and Mexican politics. And the internal net benefit of global
Why is politics a net benefit if your link is based off the action of the plan?
The politics link is talking about when we cooperate with Mexico, so NAFTA would be...
So it seems like the counterpart links to that?
Well, no, we would read cards in the block that says that.
Does the counterpart not cooperate with Mexico?
No, we would read cards in the block that said it would be popular.
Okay, that's fine. Let's talk about your politics link, actually. So, your Villarreal evidence is talking about NAFTA being massively unpopular and proving that the plan would be unpopular. Now, we've read a wreck of cards in the 1AC that says the plan reverses things that NAFTA did to Mexico. Like, our whole 1AC is like, NAFTA sucks, we need to change it. Why would the plan be perceived as the same thing?
The perception of NAFTA as like a trade agreement with Mexico means that the plan is still tied with that.
Why is the plan tied to that? It's not a trade agreement with Mexico.
So, it's the perception of NAFTA being like a negotiation with Mexico that the plan is tied to.
Okay.
So like economic engagement with Mexico.
So who was it that was upset with NAFTA?
It's talking about how their political debate was controversial between Congress and Obama.
Between Congress and Obama, that's interesting because the actor of the plan is the Export-Import Bank, which is an agency independent of Congress and that's
Obama
internally
has to
financed.
push the Ex-Im Bank.
Why would he if it's separate from Congress? It has its own budget, it finances its own projects.
Well,
Literally,
Obama
Congress
was
doesn't care.
forced to extend the budget of the Ex-Im Bank, so he probably has to push the plan too.
Really? They finance their own projects with their money, but that's fine. Let's talk about the critique. So, your Riviera card is about the Opium Wars, the Mexican-American and Spanish-American Wars, the dominion of the United States over California, Texas, New Mexico, Cuba, Puerto Rico, Anglo-American blockade of Venezuela, drug wars in Mexico, and invasion of Colombia. Why is the app the equivalent of any of these things?
So those are examples of bad things that have happened as a justification by neoliberalism.
Right, and it's saying that neoliberalism was bad in these instances. Why is financing biofuels in Mexico and making their energy sector more sustainable, perceived as the same thing as the Mexican-American and Spanish-American War?
Well, no, we'd argue that that's like a result of neoliberalism, right?
Where does your evidence say that? Or where does it, do you have any evidence in the context of the affirmative?
The Rivera evidence is in the context of economic engagement with Latin America.
And it's talking about all these different wars, and it's talking about policies like NAFTA, which turned Mexican peasants into maquila workers.
Yeah, because that's a result of neoliberalism, like those wars occurring.
That's okay. So what does the alternative do?
Vote negative to align yourself against the affirmative colonial politics.
So does it reject the affirmative instance of neoliberalism, or does it reject all neoliberalism?
It rejects the affirmative instance of neoliberalism.
Okay, so it does nothing to remedy all of it. Please. Is it 8 or 10? Does anyone have the flash drive?
I got it.
Thank you. Order will be XM, Mexico, Ag. Can I have a jump drive back?
Yeah. What's up?
Yeah. XM, Mexico, Ag. T, Counterplan. K, Politics and Mexican Politics. Destroys the biosphere. That's about to evidence adaptation isn't going to be able to solve it because warming happens so fast. The global evidence says there's such a low threshold for runaway warming in the status quo that Earth could be like the Earth's future is Venus's past unless we take action in the interim. Now warming is real. We said it as consensus of 97% of qualified scientists who've all come to the conclusion it's caused by human emissions and it's going to occur fast. That was the global evidence about multilateralism can solve warming. Their evidence doesn't assume the Export-Import Bank acting also doesn't assume the U.S. signing on to treaties which leads to motivation because right now we are not committed. That's the Kim and Gong evidence. Now yes, there will be Russia, China counterbalancing. We posted their evidence that says the finite nature of the oil trade means that Russia and China are going to become belligerent because they're going to secure access to energy resources. Now they say climate changes are bad because of protectionism. If everyone agrees to a climate agreement, then it doesn't make sense. Everyone would also trigger protectionism because everyone's already on the agreement and protectionism is high now. The NDCA 92, a European Commission identified 150 new trade restrictions over the year, warning increase in trade disruptive measures, increase in import duty hikes. EU partners who continue to apply stimulus measures pressures, countries continue to shield some of the domestic industry from foreign competition, and lack of U.S. climate leadership leads to protectionism that's spontaneous by adopting legislation that begins to internalize the cost of global warming. The U.S. will blunt ever by the EU to impose trade sanctions on electricity. Prices will increase the risk of tailings by America's trading partners due to the failure to control CO2 emissions should be a real concern to the U.S. possible because if the U.S. continues to resist global pressure, will seek control to risk trade sanctions, marketed sanctions. Now the Mexico advantage. We're not going for Asia war. We'll concede it. Doesn't escalate. We're just going for relations now. The drug trade is high now. Their evidence doesn't assume organized crime. That's the Olson evidence, which is causing Latin American money laundering operations to ally with Russian organized crime efforts. Now, none of their terrorism defense assumes a partnership with Russian organized crime that causes nuclear terror, which causes global nuclear retaliation. Leaders are irrational. Responses are inherent. That's the Morgan evidence on the agriculture advantage. High food prices are thrusting billions into global starvation. That's proven by historical analysis. That triggers government collapse, failed states, cause extinction through terrorism, drugs, weapons spread, and refugee crisis. There's Cuban ethanol. There's Cuban ethanol evidence doesn't solve because there's no Mexican industry, which means that the Mexican agriculture is still collapsing. Also, only Mexican production can trigger a U.S. transition because of the proximity. Now, food checks lead to war. That was the clear evidence above. And failed states also lead to war because they're the breeding ground for terrorists. That's the clear evidence. Topicality. We meet USFG financed biofuels towards Mexico that expands bilateral economic relations and counter-interpretation towards a country, not the government. Oxford and 13 New Mexico, a country southwest North America bordered by the U.S. Counter-interpretation 10. B towards the private sector, hosting to get economic incentives to the private sector, target country, unconditional engagement, economic engagement builds the private sector, and explosion in economic entities presents a multitude of partners for unconditional engagement with non-state actors. We meet the counter-interpretation. We finance tech for the private sector, and it's associated with Oxford Dictionary of 13 definition is associated with their interpretation makes it impossible for the affirmative to discuss the export import bank that artificially limits out the most common USFG mechanism for promoting international financing. Now, a finite number of countries and lit-based checks for generics every office extra topical. The government always takes initial steps for the private sector to get involved inevitably. Not only vote on topical if we've allowed it made it impossible, not just slightly more difficult. Otherwise, competing interpretations encourages the race to the bottom counterplan. Conditionality is voting issue to AC strategies. Few only speech to generate offense creates dangerous costs for the advocates of cross-application education kills the in-depth argument interaction. Counter-interpretation is one conditional advocacy solves their offense. Also, they can't get contradictory rules like the new lib-K and the Congress counterplan. Now, the counterplan doesn't solve warming because export-import action is key. Only greening the bank can pressure global export credit agencies to finance clean tech. It also doesn't solve the our Clairvoyance impact because it doesn't allow for a U.S. deployment of renewable technology through the Export-Import Bank. That counterplan also leads to politics because it cooperates with Mexico with Congress, which means it would be uniquely polarizing. The Export-Import Bank is shielded because it's an agency there. The Congress actually permutation to both warming is linear. Now, Congress can't pressure EC. Meeting the clean energy mandate is clean tech leadership. That's capital. The bill recommends Exxon provide 10% of financing to promote clean energy. This increase American competitiveness in the global clean energy market, provide environmental benefits. Exxon is one of the most powerful tools the U.S. government's disposal for spurring innovation and economic growth. The U.S. should act to seize that businesses are poised to seize its opportunity. Prefer evidence. Exxon is also key to competitiveness. ITF and 12 the U.S. is following behind the global economic competition. Key factors: export financing. Foreign competitors enjoy support from the XCEC. Is claims about why Exxon is not needed or grounded analysis based on faulty theories. Now, perm to the counterplan. Also, export-import bank is key to Mexican relations. That Shepherd and 3 the U.S. relationship with Mexico is one of its most important. Mexico's role in setting U.S. policy increase to enhance this relationship. Private public alliance facilitate investment in tech business infrastructure technology. Key element of successful partnership is the Exxon Bank forms stronger ties between Mexican counterparts to stimulate investment, trade, and employment. In this relationship, the fundamental role of the Exxon Bank. Now, the critique. Our interpretation is that the affirmative should defend the one and see first an alternative with a mechanism that we actualize. That's key to first and possibly after winning against a world without violence. The action against offense against unions to achieve their alternative. They should be held accountable for sovereignty, resistance, and uniqueness. That's also key to education. Weighing their all beers and athletes limited by topic actor insolvency is a comparison that never comes about. Now, neolib isn't the root cause. Their alternative is utopian. Prefer epistemology. Giordano and 12 basics to be nurtured more by anxiety and the rigorous knowledge useful for policy debates and research crucial to invest in specificity of Latin America. Treating causal relations without carefully qualified may be misleading. Trade opposites to conducive property reduction preponderance of evidence supports disagreement. Artists find evidence and questions how to make trading growth more pro-core, not how to advise improbable alternatives seductive. Generalization may be a little help. Trading integration seems to be good for the poor. Predicting effects is dependent on data and specification and simulation. Failure to run actualizable alternatives where their critique is failed. However, like in 14 critical geopolitics, not successful in altering discourse have not been successful. Had altering hegemonic structures, critical geopolitics, far from quarters of power, little some decision makers, bureaucrats, read political science, shame from within is more effective when without anti-politics, challenging representation imposed by at least fifth intentionalization, keep out of critical discourse, geopolitics, resolution, dissident intellectual working outside the exemplars of Zapatista market, had Zapatista now permutation to the plan and all non-competitive parts of the alternative. As a link turn to the critique, we saw Mexican farmers promote their financial independence. We also solve hunger, and we raised the bar from environmental standards to the export-import bank, the Shepherd and 3. The increase of U.S. exports to Latin America obligated to its corporations benefit the region. Companies enforce ethical business practices through voluntary codes of conduct, exceed environmental health and safety standards, exceed local law for compensation benefit packages, surpass local companies, provide access to quality is to improve the quality of life and foster sustainable development, promote charitable giving and community activism market. And activism now go to the politics. It's at their link. It's about NAFTA, not about the plan. You should prefer specificity. NAFTA was unpopular, but the XM is not. Their impact is also backward. The EU hates the NSA. If it's not reauthorized, that would solve relations. Their evidence says the NSA kills Euro relations, and that says Euro relations key to solve war. That's backwards. Well, past long time frame. Their article 49, the path and timing for reform remains far from clear despite momentum and Obama's plan. Both remain a long way from patches. Rogers could move forward later this spring with it to deliver a bill by early April. Republicans are hardly emphatic about their support for the change to the NSA program. Nothing but before the election, they'll keep from there are 4-4. There are 75 days left. The agenda for both parties, even parts are focusing on political legislation. No political final passage. Think Obamacare repeal was minimum wage. Congress is going to replenish the HGF pass a new budget. Federal support for insurance policies to cover loss accident active terrorism is rising. At the end of the year, lawmakers are likely to wait until late dark Democrats. Republicans do little to work the bill until election day. Very little legislation. Only things most possible finance way to the Oval Office market. At Oval Office, Obama stopped keep the Congress bills. All Hopkins 35. The Rogers and Roberts were introduced their own bill, and they would track with the language coming from the administration. Both bills and the United States stacking up stories. Now the XM doesn't go through Congress. No oversight. It's an external agency internally funded, and there's no backlash. O'Connell told the bank is not subsidizing close to fee for the work it does, which covers all the agency's costs in fiscal 2027 Treasury $1.1 billion. We contribute to the government. It's under the radar. Lilly and 10 export and propane powerful quiet financing for the XM. A direct few headlines to despite the lack of fan for the XM, they authorized $263 million in financing, including 1,820 individual transactions. European wars will never happen. Felt waste of 3 threats posed by a united Eurasia. No longer exists. No rival political ideology exists. Related hostile coalition. Carrolton and universally markets are possibly prosperity danger from a hostile coalition. Eurasian landmass approaches Euro Mexican politics. The app solves the impact. Refer a quick infusion of crash to solve energy. No oil exports with reforms as called on one Jeffrey Brown, independent petroleum geologist, correctly forecast shrinking Mexico. Oil and the effect on Mexico reforms will be small. Delay several years. It's going to take a long time to work on this agreement. Drill wells and put the wells online market. And online won't pass PM 124. The impact will take several years. Net will face increasingly challenging political landscape with limited ability to push through additional reforms that could seek out upcoming secondary legislation. Disappoint. No link uniqueness. The constitutional reform bill cost dollars PC. This IBD 1213. The reform took tremendous from the utterly through all political capitalism making the small constitutional change. Also the THA should thump the link down. Nationalists in Mexico love the plan. That's Carrolton 11. When you think of Mexico, think biofuels. California company is contracted by Mexican government to produce food using algae project aims to propel Mexico, the front of biofuels producing nation. Mexico received the grant through the National Research Council for a pilot site.
10 minutes of study time. Good. Okay, the treaty's turn. So if everyone has already agreed with your internal link, why is the warming being solved in the SWO?
Sorry, what?
If everyone already agrees with your internal link of solving the climate agreement, why is it warming being solved?
Well, no, everyone doesn't agree with the climate treaties because several reasons. First is that the U.S. hasn't signed on, so no one perceives them as actually going to follow through.
But you said it doesn't make sense because everyone has already agreed.
Oh yeah, your internal link doesn't make sense because if everyone agrees to a climate agreement, everyone would be on board with it, so there would be no reason to be protectionist.
Which piece of evidence do you read that says that everyone would be on board with the climate agreement?
All of our evidence assumes that the ECA's and Obama's credibility in a climate deal would mean that the globe signs on to a climate deal.
So it's because Obama so Obama has credibility means that China and India sign on to a climate deal?
Yeah.
Why? Why would they do that?
Well, we can read more evidence on this question, but most of our cards indicate that there's a willingness from countries around the globe to be part of these deals. The things that's stopping them are that they don't have the technology to meet their mission requirements,
I guess my question is
how does Obama's signal.
Okay, how does Obama's credibility do that? Like, what does he do specifically?
What does he do?
Yeah.
Yeah. So right now, a lot of global rising powers don't want to sign on to these agreements because they don't want to make the cuts in their own countries and then think the U.S. isn't going to have to do that as well. So they don't want to lose a relative lead in the world.
So they perceive that climate leadership is a lead in the world?
Right, if they see Obama and the
U.S.
But
if they perceive climate leadership as a lead in the world, then why don't they do it in the SWO?
Let me explain? Okay, so if the U.S. signs on to the agreements and they signal willingness to cooperate on climate, other countries are going to realize that the U.S. is making sacrifices. So can they, and they're not going to lose their relative position.
But if it's a sacrifice, then why do they perceive it as a lead in the world?
Right, because they don't want to lose their relative position of power unless the U.S. is going to make parallel sacrifices.
Which piece of evidence do you have that says that they would lose their position of power signing on to these climate agreements?
I don't think that that's the relevant part of this is that.
But that's the reason why you solve the internal link, right? because that's
No,
why they sign
that's
on.
not the only reason. The other reason is development financing provided through the Export-Import Bank. Countries don't want to meet those, sign on to the agreements because they don't have the tech to meet emission reduction standards. The Export-Import Bank can create a clean tech market that spreads that technology worldwide, so countries who originally didn't want to implement cuts would have the technology available to meet the requirements.
So which piece of evidence makes that global
The
spillover
GONG
thing?
evidence.
Okay, but why does it become cost competitive for them to use like
Because the Export-Import Bank is providing them technology. That's what we do. The louder evidence and the 1AC and the Hertz evidence, they would create a clean tech renewable market that spreads the technology worldwide, so countries who originally don't want to be part of the deals now have the ability to meet the emission reduction standards.
So they now have the ability. Which piece of evidence says that they would do it?
The
So
GONG
they have
evidence-
the ability to do it, but why would
The
they?
GONG
do it?
evidence, the Kim evidence indicate that countries are willing and they want to make the cuts, but it's stopping them because they don't have development financing, which is what the EXIM does. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Actually, I messed up. Start over. Okay, I have 205. Let me resync this.
How much time did you have left?
205. Yeah, can I get the flash drive for a second?
Yeah. So is this doc? Should we just close this one? Is this
Yeah.
not weird?
I forgot to add some stuff.
Alright, then I'll just.
Okay, my computer's taking a lot of flash, so I can just give the order. It'll be the K. The counter plan. Mexico politics. The export-import advantage. The Mexico advantage. The ag advantage. It's just called 2 NC quarters. Y'all got it? Anybody not ready?
Critique not going for it, concede the permutation, any fear is a reason to reject the art. Now to think counterplan, we're not going for it, concede the permutation, just a test of confidential conditionality is good, it's most logical, proving the counterplan words does not justify the plan, logic switch, and make use of most portable skill, also key to strategic thinking, 2AC, pressure makes it difficult, considering technical choice and argument interaction is a key skill, also research, rewards multiple good strategy, punishment, badass, passes in quantity, and quality of arguments, also key to counter advocacy skills, compels rigorous argumentation that test the aftermath says also Necron requires conditionality to our depth, on our leeway, no topic, this is the 2AC terror, shallowness is Neville, also T and K start makes use Neville block, and 2 our checks, counter interpretation, 1K, 1 counterplan checks, regression, they have to prove that we make to make it impossible, we forward the contradiction, his impact, turn brighter advocacy, impact also, they have to prove we're under beef, we don't cross-applied links to prove disadvantages, be reasonable on theory, to uniquely arbitrary and cross ourselves, we unjustified 10 counterplan error, contradicts that words, reject the argument, nothing cross-apply reasonability from topicality, Mexico politics, said impact is drop, the M&M's and kids that oil adventurers and concentration because the U.S. is adventurous and invades other nations, which imperial, which is perceived the belligerents and guarantees escalatory warfare, we only have to win a minor risk of the disadvantage because you are guaranteed and extinction impact vis-a-vis a plan turns their multi-lateral advantage because of friends meaningful cooperation because of U.S. adventurism also turns their relations advantage because it decimates Mexico U.S. relations because of oil disputes also turns the entirety of their agriculture advantage because of friends meaningful cooperation over resources which is the key internal link they say solves eternal impact no it doesn't extend the CC Allenson indicates that oil uniquely revitalizes the Mexican sector 1 cross-examination proves that their affirmative card is actually a negative
credits in the context of Mexico's declining supply due to a lack of constitutional reforms, which flips to our negative because it proves that to maintain the status quo is necessarily key to revitalize the Mexican economy. They say Mexico doesn't have oil imports. No, Mexico is the largest potential producer in the world. NDCA also they have a lot of reserves and companies are willing to invest. MBB and 14 companies are potentially to go invest up to 700 billion, 20 billion new investment GDP growth. 5% they say it doesn't pass the House, was written 3 months ago. You should defer to our dire evidence. It indicates that it will pass, but it's close opposition is ramping up and threatens to tank secondary regulations. But Nieto spearhead in April's uniquely that's your dire evidence. Additionally, there is political support by overcoming opposition. This also proves that Nieto is PC because it's contextualized Nia. The uninformed Mexico's required government report Mexico. Energy launch of the state of the state of Mexico led by Nieto up here. Mexico got a brand new farm and process budget store comes straight politician production is following PM. Reports are necessary. They say PC not key. This ounces in the constitutional reforms last year are SARMs indicates that Nieto has revitalized PCs because of primary regulation because it was perceived as a massive victory for Nieto. However, he must maintain his reservoir of political capital in order to actually keep Nieto's vital primary regulation through 1 and 3. 20 preservation period 2015 Nieto government breaking the presidency of Paris and innovation requirement as most coordination of other countries bear natural reforms in the past 50 years as such as enhance Nieto's reputation. They say THA tells CHA occurred half a year ago and it also wasn't controversial similar to the plan because it was energy cooperation. Also doesn't take out the dissent because it didn't implicate primary regulations. They say there's no risk of the link to extend these SARMs. The plan is on face perceived as anti-American. It doesn't matter what the results of the plan are because American intervention is historically unpopular because it portrays Mexico as being an incompetent nation which pisses off politicians. We have an anti-Americanism link that the plan is a flip-flop. We are on fire for taking the American president in terms of nationalism. Native parties are the same Avenue President tries to do penetration nationalism relationships versus also independently flip-flops. Tank PC code in 97 President also wants to take the least made a waffling beating side of weakling waffling politician president who exactly we also control a focus like the CC as well as the SARMs as well as the dire evidence paints a picture of a focus internal link. We must maintain 3-party negotiations in order to pass secondary regulations. The plan sparks massive congressional backlash, which proves our argument. The export-import advantage. Go to the office on the top. They've dropped the trade war impact that goes nuclear, circumvents various common states in the status quo. Every unstable region goes nuclear, that's in power jams independently. WTO collapse turns the entire case, Spanish practically for the default of global trade negotiation, keyboard international poverty, credibility about the future trade war, trading, fighting, center, right, terrorism, poverty, ingredients, and global account, world, trading, disability, trade, global order, encouraging parties, bank, great state, competition, all trade, world, based, so, current energy, the thing for future central prosperity, the alternative for new good economy also turns that Russia and China manage because it removes multilateral structure for cooperation and encourages belligerent alliances, also turns Russia relations to terrorism because it's perceived as U.S. international aggression and prevents responsible cooperation over WMD terrorism, turns warming and makes environmental cooperation tableau, which is the key internal link. Anderson and Gretel and one very obviously like the punishment chair. These are reminding agreements for other wars to share much of all the trade to be such as well as environmental practices and trade agreements, subject to free trade consequences, the big picture consequences. Also, trade is the only way to adapt warming to not trade innovation, mitigate climate change, countries adapt to margin, these hack and know how efficient possible because it's huge development. The international economy gains our audience with climate change technology, climate change, training, adaptation, or adopting for us with all conditions. They say all the countries agree that is exactly our argument. The plan imposes a ridiculous litany of tariff negotiations as well as a regulatory framework that decks legitimacy of the WTO because it violates WTO code. It essentially replaces the WTO's regulatory strong approach to a former dust of its own, so as i.e. vis-a-vis an ad-hom approach, essentially it decks legitimacy of the WTO, which is the key internally to our argument. They say protectionism is high. This doesn't take out the disadvantage because it is contextualized to WTO. However, expanded trade is coming, which protects protections in AFP and 322 the U.S. shows plan negotiating the U.S. trade list and no accounts of tax on there. The WTO also exports are high. It's a trend which disproves causality. AP and 319 big gains and exports to market levels on 14 is current counting on charity are the registered company on the subject of goods and investment. So they say lack of leadership causes protectionism. This begs the question of time frame. Protectionism is low and ceases in these as per Harvard. The plan revitalize the U.S. protectionism, which is our link to the past norms and also decks legitimacy to WTO, which is the linchpin of the global trade system, which disproves their internal link. The impact of a problem. There's no terminal impact to warming, application, mitigation, salt, and residual impact. We have the consensus data objective studies that all conclude that warming will have no severe impacts on the prior century. No adaptations come. Do cause an impact as the metals and metals which flips right out because it proves that we control time for their having tipping point argument. The metals and metals indicates that is statistical bogus. Their averages overly hyperbolically rejected, likely intolerant, and grown up in 6 times during growing rejection and growing warming needs swallowing prediction warming or growing human organs that really saved a lot of scraped up and growing fun increase in normal and south terms just reaction, not just by economic high range of concentrated sheep, economic growth on the greenhouse, gas control, multilateralism fails. This is essentially conceded argument. The young evidence indicates that it causes gridlock, which does not take out the link to the disadvantage because based on the WTO. However, it proves that cooperation is essentially bogus in the imagination because self-interest over webs additionally swarming is slow, not really. Tail allowance is better than theirs, and the tail allowance is better than theirs, and indicates NASA satellite data is all forging warming is actually decreasing because heat is being let out into space, which disproves their statistical analysis. There's no risk of Russia-China alliance. They don't send their internal link is bogus because obviously even if Russia and China have an alliance, it's not meant because of oil cooperation, rather it disproves their causality to their internal link. There's also no terminal impact. E.g. John Allen said kids of geographic incompatibility, parentheses worse. The terminal impact is impossible. Z. Han and Nathan are putting recent topics probably development streets of problems of immigration to nation. Hoping to return to competitive worse towards our number 7 to 1 about the front of Russian trade from the south and system or subterranean central Asia is simply impossible. The Mexico advantage, their internal link to relations makes absolutely no sense. It's a litany of internal links that disproves the terminal impact to causality. Obviously, IFFs is not necessarily key because biofuels that drop the called evidence political institutions check the versatility, which proves that they don't have a terminal impact to collapse, which disproves their internal link. They've also conceived that relations are fundamentally resilient. This is a framing question. The shift around indicates that a large number of Mexico immigrants in the United States, as well as an inevitable economic cooperation solves relations. They don't have an internal link differential, which disproves their argument on this question. Independently, last-minute cooperation is inevitable, which solves terrorism, hair loss, and there is a third of cooperation, preferably cooperated in the face consequences of non-radical change on language substance and quality change is unlikely to be significant. They've also driven the near-sharp atmospheric risk of nuclear terrorism probability involved in internal link to a successful detonation is functionally nil. There are a litany of tech and expertise. Various studies prove that near-sharp there's a risk of retaliation. Jack Smith and Ford Republicans did retaliate much of the military action results in with charge which was all about his responsibility. They engaged with retaliation moderated significantly independently. They direct relations. The shifter on indicates that the NATO is trying to reorient relations towards a more trade-based across the plan reorients towards security, which stacks the terminal impact to the relations advantage. Agriculture, 2 drops. Cuba as well as Brazil are all causing the rail is real as well as Cuba. Cuba standard ounce indicates that they're massively revamping ethanol production. Even through plant solves the terminal impact to Russia from it doesn't solve those all costs.
205.
Cool. Okay, let's talk about the Nieto dissent. 2 things happened recently in Mexico. First, they passed a constitutional amendment that already allows energy reforms to take place. And second, they passed a transboundary hydrocarbon agreement, which was oil cooperation between the U.S. and Mexico.
Right,
if those things already passed, why didn't they stop Nieto's political capital?
Okay, so the transboundary hydrocarbon agreement, FYI, had been ratified by the Mexican Senate years back. The U.S. recently ratified it.
Sure. Well, why didn't that look bad for Nieto?
Because statutory frameworks regarding Mexico's constitution is still necessary to allow the U.S. to actually come to drill.
Sure, okay, so why didn't the constitutional
I can talk about
amendments
constitutional reforms. Our politics dissent is in the context of secondary frameworks. Primary reforms have passed. However, secondary reforms are still necessary to actually catalyze bidding for oil contracts.
Wait, but why didn't the constitutional amendment collapse Nieto's political
because,
capital?
like, he won. Like, this was a really big deal. It was
when he
a win
spent
for
political
Nieto.
capital getting it, right?
Yeah, but argument would be that.
So
we
he has
heard a ton of
infinite
evidence that
capital?
indicates that it's essentially sort of revitalized Nieto's reservoir political capital.
Oh.
So, because it was a huge
So
victory.
now he has political capital to do it, to do the second one. Okay,
Yeah,
so
that's our argument. It
okay,
will
which
pass
piece of
the
evidence says
constitution.
Nieto's political capital is key? Because now what has to happen is that Congress writes the laws, right? So why does Nieto need to be involved in that at all? All of your evidence just speaks to Congress drafting the legislation.
So we would disagree to that. Congress is drafting legislation. Argument is that the PRD, as well as the PRI and PAN, are having sort of ideological conflictions. Argument is that Nieto's PC is key to
Which
sort of
card says that?
recognize.
I'll read you the entire 1NC card. Last year, Nieto forged a broad political consensus around reforms. That's when he spent his PC, right? There will certainly be challenges from the staunchly opposed labor unions, political opponents, and companies who feel they've lost out. The hurdle is in the political arena. Mexico's Congress is far more divided than it was a year ago. Where does that make a claim about Nieto's political capital
I think
being
that
key?
proves that Nieto's PC is necessary to remedy those, to make it palatable.
The card does not say that. That's fine. Let's talk about protectionism. So, which evidence says we would collapse the WTO?
It would be the real evidence. Or, sorry.
Yeah, that evidence assumes carbon tariffs without any mechanism to meet the reduction standards.
No, it would be the Rican evidence.
Yeah, that evidence. It assumes carbon standards without any ability for other countries to meet the emission caps, right? The plan leads to global trade of clean tech to meet emission reduction standards. If that's true, then why would we cause protectionism?
Sure, so you've dropped the Newsmax evidence, which indicates that Obama's currently pushing a sort of framework for emissions reductions that necessarily works.
I mean, no. That
It's
evidence
a
does not
uniqueness
assume.
question
That
because your
evidence
evidence
doesn't
doesn't
assume-
assume what Obama's actually pushing. The plan revitalizes U.S.
Yeah,
environmental
but the
leadership.
plan is through
But
the
what you don't-
Export-Import Bank, which has the primary purpose of facilitating trade and clean tech. If that's true, why would we cause protectionism?
We don't
We,
think that's-
by
yeah.
definition, de facto
So-
lead to more trade.
It essentially revitalizes Obama's push in the multilateral
That's
arena,
fine.
which we argue is bad.
Get the flash drive.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It'll be the last advantage and then the politics system.
Can you put the last position on the top?
Oh, okay. Politics and then the last advantage.
Is that add a second? Or politics first, add a second?
Yeah, politics first. So.
Just put it on the like this. Yeah.
Go into the back. Just in ways in terms of case we control the only scenario for extinction because they do not have a piece of relative impact even to the specificity of our impact scenario. Their impact defense is the context of European wars, whereas our impact is about your Asian wars. This subsumes all their defense or Asian wars drawn Asian countries as well as the U.S. due to vested interest in the resources in those areas. It turns the entire case versus multilateralism. EU cooperation is key to strong global multilateralism. Absent that, they can't solve NSA. Reforms are key to maintain strong relations with the EU. That's the one and the second is warming. Nuclear war collapses the environment and erodes the ozone layer, makes warming inevitable. Third is terrorism, instability, and Eurasia makes acquisition of nuclear weapons more likely, linearly increases the risk of terrorism. Fourth is failed states. The conflict in Eurasia makes those nations more likely to develop into collapse and trigger all of your impacts. Go to Lime Island. They say the link is about NAFTA. Yes, our link is about NAFTA. It's an instance of economic engagement which triggered backlash in Congress. Appears proof that it causes backlash with Mexico. Now the plan is massively contentious. This evidence is specific to the affirmed Carney. 12 the congressional efforts to reauthorize the export-import bank are stoked and increasingly contentious lobbying fights between the waging the Republican right. They become a flashpoint tension between the Tea Party and the trade groups, the business groups, the National Association, manufacturing, Boeing, the blanketed capital, unleash the answer all over parts of the country. It's unpopular and divides the GOP. Wall Street Journal in 227. The export-import bank caused a dispute between the faction of the Republican Party of the bank. The party business friendly from those who criticize the bank as an inappropriate government interference in the market in hopes of avoiding such a vice Republicans to the banks, avoiding the bank of their race. Similar debut to the base of the signal Republicans are unlikely to elude warning the side could attention away from their election message. They say the EU hates the NSA. The EU hates the status quo NSA. However, it's a question of whether or not we can reform it to be able to solve relations. They are mad about constant surveillance under Section 215. However, the reform means it goes back to private companies, and the U.S. only gets it when they are perceiving threats. There's only a risk that the bill is able to solve relations. That's the one it's even if they say it won't pass. NSA reforms will pass, and Obama's continued push is key to success. We posted all of their evidence, which is the latest test for uniqueness. Obama's legislation and language of the bill is key to success, which just proves that political capital's key momentum is swinging. Obama has a hold of key constituents. Courier in 4-4. The White House is bipartisan, and Congress has finally appeared to be moving the right direction. The plan has a data collection plan ways to the criticism. The intelligence agency could have the judge's order for specific search before the test. The government would be limited. The approach has one conditional approval from private advocacies. Big players are meeting with Obama and coming to a consensus. Now, Gerstein in 411, the Judiciary Committee chairman confirmed that he's consulting with the White House. Whatever emerges, the committee will learn aggressively in the direction of reform. We are working bipartisan fashion with the Judiciary Committee. Obama's commanding support now. Siegel in 410, the president recently announced his intention to reform the metadata collection under Section 215. The Patriot 163 members of Congress have co-sponsored the USA Freedom Act. President has provided the plan. The USA Freedom Act enjoys the broadest support, is bipartisan by Camaro and publicly vetted for months. Which proves that it will pass. They say Obama is not key. Their card is bad. At first, the party says that the House bill would end the NSA entirely. That's the opposite of our argument. NSA needs reforms to solve Europe. This is another reason why Obama is key, because it's key to preventing the House bill from passing and allowing the NSA to collapse completely. Second is it says that it needs the language of the administration, which just proves that Obama's political capital is key. Obama is committed to pushing Congress for NSA reform, and he's key to success. Hot tip in forward Obama administration following Congress and additional forms of government spying operation. The White House proposed on NSA bill collection would not end its last word. Their surveillance. We have begun the process. They say that the export-import bank is not Congress proves not subject to backlash. That evidence I read above and the link evidence on the top proves that it's subject to backlash. And it doesn't matter whether or not the plan goes through Congress. It's a question of whether or not it gets tied to Obama. Even if the plan doesn't go through Congress, it gets tied to Obama because he gets the blame for it because it's so massive. Obama's response for the export-import bank extended until 2014 proves he pushes the plan. Landler in 12 Obama signed the bill that extends the export-import bank through 2014. Critical 11 the playing field with China and other countries manufacturing the made business groups like China, United States, Chamber of Congress, National Association, manufacturing mobilized the strong, lobbying effort the president been strong, championing the Exim bank down. They say it's under the radar. The F cannot go under the radar. The link proves that Congress ties the plan to Obama. Even if he doesn't push a perception, means that he still loses political capital on it because of the unpopularity link. The unpopularity link. Also, the evidence I read about proves that they would tie it to Obama, which proves it cannot go under the radar. They say no European wars. This evidence was written in 2003 and doesn't assume a collapse of relations. Stokes in 10 Europe is at the crossroad. One path leads to total extinction. Europe is America's largest export market. At the end of weak periods of weakness would undermine Afghanistan dealings with Iran, China, and Russia. Financial meltdown would leave Europe in little political capital be spent on foreign policy. Right, Europe's financial troubles leads vulnerability to Russia, meddling European antipathy will make it harder to unify European positions on climate change. Also, our impact subsidies because it's about Eurasian wars. They can't solve production. The ethanol mandate in the U.S. proves that even if they solve cost competition to some degree, the ethanol production is inevitable. They also drop the patch of evidence. They don't get the state collapse impact fail. States statistically have no correlation with aggression. Empirics are on our side. Whenever failed states has collapsed, there's no risk that increases the likelihood of terrorism, which is what their impact evidence is talking about. There's no impact of famine. Stats and empirics prove that cooperation is a greater motivating factor than war. It's also not economically cost competitive, and nations know that, which proves that they will not go into conflict. Rather, they would cooperate rather than go into conflict. No resource wars, treacherous. In total resource wars in 1917, Vodka suggested the main conflict entered the famine. The cases were literally as flimsy in 1970. Most the comments can be concluded as quickly as they started. Resource wars unlikely to fewer conquer source. The eventual hydrocarbons become attractive because the economic rationale for war has always been overstated because globalization made it cheaper to buy than steel. Anything else?
We had 9-7.
Well, I started at 9 and I'm at 2:42.
Oh, I had 3:02. Because we had nights.
Yeah.
Do you mind if we compile the two documents or do you want them separate?
Could you come up? Wait, so how much did you have?
2. 3:02. Then ag, then Nieto, then Waldes. Not ready. Warming undermines economies and causes state failure. New studies prove that runaway GHGs are existential for magnitude because you can't come back from it though. The green evidence also says that if we crush the 4-degree threshold, it will make Earth unlivable because the temperature rise will deoxygenize the atmosphere and make Earth like a second Venus. Now, only Green the X-Bank is going to be able to spur momentum for multilateral climate agreements. That's going evidence on their turn. First, some defense. WTO collapse will cause trade wars. Bullet for the world will not cause trade wars. If the WTO is found to point the reverse, developing countries will be free to develop trade policies. And their own interest countries will continue to trade. We have a vast body of treaties that provide tools to ensure that trade takes place in a way that promotes workers' rights, creates employment, and does not take risks to the environment to do exactly what the WTO is designed to do, but fails miserably to achieve now. It doesn't turn clean tech leadership, multilateralism, clean tech leadership turns this because we export green technology and we stop an energy nexus which would take trade anyway. Now, it doesn't turn relations because only a biofuel alliance is going to be able to solve in the long term. Also, doesn't turn warning because we solve what their card is talking about needing. Their card is talking about needing to cap emissions from trade, but climate treaties would result in that, which means it actually turns their turn. Now, protectionism is increasing. Now, the EC evidence is really recent. It says that the European Commission identified 150 new trade restrictions this past year that their evidence does not assume. It means that new trade is causing disruptive measures that like import duty hikes in the European and Asian region. Also, they have conceded the Fontaine evidence, which is that a lack of U.S. leadership in the clean tech industry is going to cause protectionism because by adopting legislation that begins to internalize the cost of global warming, the U.S. would blunt EU efforts to impose trade sanctions, and trade sanctions as a result of a refusal to combat the climate emissions are a real threat in the status quo. The only way to avoid this is by doing the affirmative now. There's a terminal impact to global warming that was in the overview of multilateralism is going to the evidence that says multilateralism fails is speaking to the status quo, and yes, treaties fail in the status quo because the U.S. isn't enforcing them. But if we get other export credit agencies on board into the U.S. shows that it's committed, then it will be able to solve. There is a risk of a Russia-Chinese alliance doesn't assume an energy that's the nexus that's happening now because they're desperate for oil. The only way to stop is by showing green Gemini. Now on to ag. Food prices, 1.2 billion people are guaranteed to die of starvation in the status quo, no question. That's the branches to now our evidence. Food shocks, that's the all out war, research wars, cause government collapse and failed states because they harbor terrorists, only solving for the food for fuel trade-off and transitioning away from corn is going to be able to lower prices. That's the McDonald's evidence. Yes, Cuba may be an all cause, but it's a small cause. We'll be able to lower prices enough if we are able to put more corn on the market for food instead of for fuel, because that makes prices drop since we're flooding the market. Now also, ethanol production is not inevitable with corn because we can shift away if we subsidize other forms of failed states. Do have a correlation with aggression. They don't assume a staple grain, which is corn in this means that resource wars will uniquely happen because it's a staple bring for 1.6 billion people onto the NATO. Just at first is that there's a massive concession that there's no oil exports even with reforms because the COB evidence post-dates and says that shrinking reserves means that any effect of Mexican oil will be small and delayed for several years. There's no oil until after 2020 because production is declining and you can't get any of the oil out. This is not a constitution problem. This is a resource problem. Now, second is it's not going to pass the BM evidence from 124 and says the political landscape is limiting NATO's ability to push through additional reforms. And also the link is not unique because first is constitutional reforms already passed. The first wave of them passed, which means that either that should have stopped all of NATO's PC or this DISAD is not going to cost him PC either because he doesn't have to push for it. That's a BM 124 evidence. Now also THA comes to link the U.S. Department of the Interior 1223, the Secretary of the Interior applauded the Mexican THA established a firm with U.S. companies and Pemex to develop transparent reserves. Obama said into law today as part of the Bipartisan Budget Act. U.S. companies and Pemex will voluntarily enter into agreements to jointly develop and diplomacy is not unique. PL44 Mexican Foreign Minister held a meeting with the U.S. to discuss the relations between the countries. The parties discuss the agreements by the NATO and discuss border management. Also, the impact solves and the AF impact solves because the Clarivis is going to be able to solve energy independence and because it causes the biofuel lines, which means we're no longer relying on other countries. Now, go on to politics. It's not going to pass, and there's a long time from there. Author concludes affirmative. It says that the path and timing for reform remains far from clear and a long way from passage. At earliest, the bill will be delivered is during the summer. Now, the GOP also is not empathetic to NSA reform. That's all from their evidence, the part that they don't read about. And also, nothing's going to pass before the election because there's only 75 days left, and the agenda is sparse. There's tons of other things that Congress has to focus on besides NSA, like Obamacare, repealing votes, minimum wage, HTF, and the budget bill. This means that Dems and GOP aren't going to do anything to rock the political boat before then. That's the O'Keefe evidence. Last is that Obama is not key. The Rogers and Ruppersberg introduced their own bill that's literally identical in language to that of the administration. They didn't respond to this argument correctly. It means that Obama's push is not key because Rogers and Ruppersberg are going to do it all. That's the Hawkins evidence. Now, there's also no link on politics because it doesn't go through Congress. The Export-Import Bank is an independent agency that's internally financed. O'Connell evidence says that it costs Congress no money because they spend using the money that they make on loans. It even contributed $1.1 billion to the Treasury. Also, legally says that it's under the radar. The other and just authorized 360 million projects. Also, zero risk of congressional backlash. Feinberg 2-4. The Senate Banking Committee held a hearing oversight and reauthorization of X, and there was no inspector and auditor to discouraging warrants opening or warrants for claim petition to move forward with the authorization because bank has made money for the government by giving Republicans recommended Oxford and expressed their support for the authorization. House demonstrated the total mastery of the committee. Also, their impact is entirely backwards because it says that the NSA is going to kill the alliance, which means that they're not going to be able to solve any impact in any way. There's not going to be any Eurasian wars. Our evidence is very specific to Eurasian and said that it's not going to escalate in the long term.
2 minutes. What card were you referencing Congress submitted their offer?
That is the Hawkins evidence from the 2AC.
politics, Mexico politics, export import, ag, Mexico.
Mexico advantage.
At the bottom. Everybody good?
Decent outweighs in complicated case. The 1 AR gets the impact defense with 5 seconds left to judge it. Warning any of her assertions. None of their evidence applies because our evidence most reaching emphasis in the context of European wars. Lack of U.S. Europe relations cause European wars so successfully go nuclear. No new to extrapolation because it makes the 1 AR impassable impossible because sandbagging is uniquely bad. They dropped all the 1 in our turns case analysis, which means that we outweigh on late time frame because they just said is submitted to the Congress proves that we control time frame on this question. Magnitude is a horrible frame for debate because there are an infinite number of magnitude obligations. They've also dropped the terminal impact, which means that even if they go for their warming advantage, we necessarily outweigh on that triad is a terrible frame because logical policymaker only submits policies and does policies. What he can actually do, even if you decide that there's a lower scale of politics, is that the case of the risk of cases so absurdly that supercharges all their impact. They've also dropped the internal link, which proves that we win a match versus we have defense on all other levels of their scenarios. Group the won't pass arguments. There is no recess arguments. Our evidence post-haste alters, which is a framing question that is conceded because it is the most predictive evidence in coronary as well as the GERD analysis indicates that Obama is pushing in these sides go. However, that is necessary to realign as well as make it palatable for the Republicans and Democrats. Even if there are all their congressmen pushing, that doesn't deny the fact that Obama is pushing because they have conceded our argument that Obama is necessary to spearhead the language as well as the legislation in the bill. They don't extend a piece of evidence by name, which means that you should give me some leeway on this argument. They say Obama isn't key. This is a new argument, which means that you should be skeptical of new two-hour extrapolation, but I get to read a card on this anyway. The bill is
Read that.
it's top of the agenda. WAPO 330. Public country movement closes contest on finally had a circumstantial legislation would be the top of the on the top of the agenda. Additional other issues do not come because they don't have a piece of evidence in case that it would drain political capital, which disproves the causality on that internal group. The link debate plan is massively contentious, even if they have some empirical examples of how Congress has authorized $1 billion. That doesn't deny the fact that empirically the GOP as well as the Dems are hated the Carney evidence in case that the congressional efforts to reauthorize the export-import bank are directly tied to Obama because Obama has been pushing export-import reauthorization as well as increased funding in the Senate. They don't have a thumper that occurs within the next one, which means that we shall win a Republican as well as a Democrat backlash interlink. They also dropped the interlink that PC is uniquely and is relevant to the vote, which means that supercharges all of our link arguments and divides the GOP, which makes the bill unpalatable because they tie it to Obama, i.e. they horse trade and then they take hostages regarding Obama's NSA bill, which supercharges the risk of the link. They say their impact is backwards. They drop the table evidence that NSA reform is uniquely key to make it palatable for the EU. Otherwise, the NSA does not get reformed, which is uniquely bad, which disproves that they don't have a piece of evidence to back this up, which means that this is just an assertion and you should be skeptical of Mexico policies. We're not going for it because it's not unique that there is no terminal impact and no terminal impacts as well as all the THA thumpers. They don't have a coherent link to an argument, and any risk of a link to is subsumed by the politics disadvantage because we concede no impact defense. Export import on going for the turnized terminal link defense will concede no impact. However, it doesn't deny the fact that they dropped all of our trade arguments. That they dropped all of our trade arguments. That trade is necessarily key to foster adoption, i.e. it is necessary to diffuse technology as well as lead clean technology. Will concede that protectionist sentiment is increasing the status quo. The plan cannot revitalize that extended Newsbank as well as the Russo evidence. It only exacerbates existing protectionism because it lacks legitimacy of the WTO and encodes protectionist legislation regarding that institutes ridiculous standards for carbon emissions that the plan cannot do. They don't read any evidence that assumes what Obama is pushing in his clean leadership, which means you should defer to the specificity of our scenario. Protectionism is increasing. The plan exacerbates that. They've dropped our internal link that trade as well as a lack of protectionism is necessarily key to solve global warming, which is a solvency deficit that is conceded in supercharts. They don't have a link trade on the starting because we'll concede uniqueness. They don't have uniqueness for their link trade. There's no impact to warming. They dropped our Taylor Adams. You should be skeptical of all of their data. Our Taylor Adams indicates that the Earth is actually cooling and that all of their authors and NASA satellites data have fabricated this. It takes conclusion. They have no causality to any of their terminal impacts. The terminal impact of a magnet. Their description of the U.S. of Earth as a second Venus is obviously a reason for you to hold their evidence to some degree hyperbole. Our liquor evidence indicates that scientists that support the thesis of global warming have an incentive to overstate the actual climatic consequences of global warming, which means that you should be skeptical. Adaptation is a conceded warm medicine and indicates that last minute adaptations such as GMOs, SO2, carbon sequestration are all sufficient to solve, which means that so long as nations are sufficient to solve the terminal impact, there is no risk of a Russia-China alliance. The Zihan evidence indicates that there are geographical incompatibilities, and the second piece of Zihan evidence I read indicates there are cultural as well as people incompatibilities. That means that they will inevitably be belligerent, that there is no risk of alliance. They've also dropped that they don't have an internal link because an alliance is not necessarily key to U.S. clean leadership. They agriculture advantage. They drop all causes Cuba and Brazil. They don't get to resuscitate arguments in this and the one year Brazil and Cuba are massively increasing production in the status quo, which disproves causality because food prices should have been fluctuating. There's zero risk of causality. All of their arguments are correlation. There's some risk as resource wars there. Warrants in the 1 hour extremely light, which means you should hold the line on 2 hours extrapolation. The textual evidence as well as the illusion states rigorous statistics as well as regression lines that indicates their authors conflict correlation with causality. Empirically, when food prices have risen, there have been no risk of resource wars. They drop the pathogen. They don't actually say failed states impact because failed states do not necessarily lead to war. I answered about Mexico. They drop the linked relations are resilient and high in the status quo. They plan exacerbates that. I answered that at the bottom because it reorients that to security cooperation, which means that we access full weight of this advantage.
Oh, sorry, 302. What? Exim, Mexico advantage politics. is causing a thermonuclear war. Imagine the war between the three countries with the largest nuclear arsenals in the world. That would be the largest magnitude conflict. Also, it's the quickest time frame because the perception of oil's finite nature is causing countries to become more and more belligerent to secure their energy future, which means that their 5 seconds of impact defense is not going to be sufficient. They make assertions about geography. The fact that Russia and China are in 2 different parts of the globe doesn't mean that they cannot collaborate. They have close political ideologies, and they're going to collaborate on forming an energy nexus. Yes, the wanting our extended warrants as to why the nexus is forming over energy, which means that geography is not going to inhibit them this time. Yes, we also still have an internal link to solve it, because by allowing for the U.S. to manufacture renewable energy and clean technology, we will have a source of energy that's distinct from oil, which means that we will not get entangled in costly overseas battles over these conflicts. Now, they have no terminal impact defense, which means this war is guaranteed to escalate. Turns all of their scenarios. Now, I'll answer their protectionism arguments. There's no they say protectionism is high now, which means we can never solve warming. That doesn't matter. They don't have any evidence specific about the Exim Bank, which we said is specifically designed to promote trade of clean technology, which means that even if in the abstract trade treaties, warming treaties can collapse for free trade, that they won't in the future. Also, we had impact defense that they conceded, which says that WTO collapse won't cause trade wars, which means that even if the agreements collapse at the WTO, there will be no trade wars. It doesn't trigger any of their impact. That was a conceded argument, which means we don't have to answer it. Now, they also conceded our Fontaine evidence, which says that the U.S. climate leadership can solve protectionism because it allows us to avoid trade sanctions that occur because we're not imposing enough climate treaty restrictions. Now, warming. Global warming outweighs framing issues should be magnitude because intervening actors can solve Eurasian conflict, but you cannot negotiate with the environment. A 1% risk means you vote out because warming affects all future generations. Absent new sequestration policies, runaway warming causes massive sea level rises and temperature increase that deoxygenate the atmosphere, make Earth the second Mars with only a few microbes surviving. Now, Earth isn't cooling in the status quo. Our authors are all qualified. They have PhDs in climate science and physics, which means they're not biased. We also have a 90% expert consensus on our side. We're not hyperbolizing because the global evidence says that there's a low threshold for runaway warming. He's a PhD in physics. He's said that Matzo says that adaptation is never going to resolve because they've conceded runaway warming is going to happen, and once we pass the 4-degree threshold, then we can never come back from it. That was the Kim evidence. That was a conceded warrant that the 1AR extended out the Mexico advantage. We conceded terminal impact defense, which means that even if they have a turn to this advantage, there's no impact to it. Politics. We turn any impacts with Claremont because it's the fastest time frame. Russia-China energy nexus would also. The Russia-China energy nexus would also trigger EU trade wars because it's in the Eurasian region. Now, their impact scenario makes almost 0 sense. Their SASO evidence says that the bill is key to reauthorizing and strengthening the NSA, not reforming it. Regardless, there's nothing European leaders hate more right now than the NSA. Their own internal link evidence comes from an article called NSA Spying Torpedoes American Business in Europe. There's only a risk of reauthorizing the NSA hurts the EU-Eurasia alliance, which triggers the impact. They have no evidence for their illogical assertions. There's also no EU wars are not going to happen. This evidence is specific to Eurasia. It says there's no threats there and there's no rival political ideologies that want to trigger hostility. The danger is literally 0, according to Fenways, who's a professor of political science. Now, there's no reason that the AF is going to derail negotiations on the NSA deal. There's no link. First is that the Export-Import Bank is an external agency which is internally funded and revenue positive. That's the O'Connell evidence. It says it has its own leadership and funding stream, which means that while negotiations are ongoing in Congress over the bill, the NSA, the Exim is off doing its own thing, which is not getting involved with Congress. Second, the Lillian evidence says that Exim constantly conducts transactions that included, and they conducted 3,000 transactions just in the past year, and Congress did not conduct an audit of any of them or try to oversee any of them, which means it constantly is going under the radar. Third, they conceded our link thumper. There was already a hearing for reauthorization of the Export-Import Bank this year in February. There were no discouraging words heard about the bank. The fact that the revenue for the government made it popular with Congress. They commended the bank for its activity, and the Export-Import Bank president mastered the crowd. This is our Feinberg evidence. It posts all their link evidence about the Exim, which means that it's sufficient to thump all of their Exim unpopular links. Also proves that the Exim is not tied to Obama because he was not even at the hearing. Now, we also thumped their Mexican link. You can cross-apply our thumpers from the Mexican politics side. It says that the U.S. is already engaging with Mexico now. It says Mexican foreign ministers met with the U.S. and discussed high-level economic dialogues. That proves it. Their generic Mexico link has already been triggered. If we thump one link, we can thump the entire disad. It means the entire disad is moot because we have already had engagement with Mexico, and it should have triggered the link. This is from 4-4, which is the same time as the disad. Now, low risk is no risk, and there should be no risk of this disad if there's no risk of a link. Now, they also have conceded that there won't be anything before the election. They did not address one of our thumpers. We listed a laundry list of things that are going to be ongoing in Congress that they're going to focus on in the status quo. Obamacare repeal votes, minimum wage, HTF, and the budget bill, all things that are evident. Uniqueness evidence doesn't speak to it. If those things are all true, then Congress is obviously going to focus on them and not the Exim Bank's policies.
warming advantage outweigh the disad. I thought the main problem is on the disad, you have 2 link cards that say reauthorization of the Exim Bank is unpopular with the GOP, but not entirely, you don't have an argument about why the plan is that or why the plan would be tied into something like that, etc. They have an argument that XM transactions happen all the time, and you have no argument. I think what you needed here is an argument about the nature of the XM transaction that they did. So you need an argument about why Congress doesn't like when the administration picks winners in renewables. They don't like renewable funding in general. They don't like it when the Exim Bank gives money to foreign countries instead of just facilitating exports here, etc. And I thought that would have bolstered your link, and that would have got you out of their argument that the Exim Bank literally does transactions all the time. So it's not like anytime the Exim Bank does something, it's controversial because it happens thousands of times. But maybe the nature of the plan could be biofuels, could be renewables, could be Mexico. You could have taken your pick about Congress just being really ornery about any of those things. So I had a hard time distinguishing XM action from all the other stuff going on in the status quo. The 1R doesn't really have an answer to this midterms card, which establishes like a bunch of stuff that's happening that could dilute focus on NSA reforms. On warming, I just kind of concluded you were wrong about a lot of the protectionist stuff you said. The fact that you didn't have a corresponding card to answer this WTO collapse doesn't mean all trade flows stop is problematic for you. Your trade cards are just like, trade is obviously how we would diffuse tech, which keeps self-warming, and it's good for the economies, which is good for warming if we trade. But I never thought you had I never really thought you got to the point where a climate treaty would stop all trade flows, especially in the world of the fact that they massively increase available tech that countries would want to adopt. And this argument, it's not a unique risk very much because they have this argument that EU is going to do trade sanctions now. So it's not like you have a unique kind of argument that's distinguishable from the SQUO in terms of risk. The warming impact, I can't really say it's high probability of total extinction. Your Taylor card is not something I would invest very much time in, but your other 2 cards are fine. And this point is a little under debate about the AF, about the veracity of your like worst case scenario claims. So I thought this reduction was noticeable, mostly just because the AF kind of under debated these adaptation worst case scenario arguments, but not as close as the reduction in the disad vis-a-vis the link argument. Yeah, I have some. I will say that the Russia-China impact was pretty weird, in that the one AR has like a sentence on this, and it's mostly just kind of weird the way you have it set up. The Clairvoyance card doesn't really say desire for oil brings them together. It says they would just fight. So I think your impact is messed up. You don't really want to read the blink card. You want to read a card that's like Russia and China will do scary things for oil and cause global instability. But that was like way under debated. Couldn't give the AF much credit for that. Same thing for European war defense. And also this argument about the arg that the SQUO means the NSA collapses, which solves Europe. A, it's like backwards because SQUO does not mean NSA collapses. And B, that was like 2 AC cross-checks, but never in any of the speeches again. So there were some 2AR, 1AR things that were disconnected. The last arg I had on the disc was this Mexico thumper, and I didn't know why that was justified in the 1AR. I thought that was a new arg in the 1AR.
I'd say the risk of a case is probably lower than it should be because of 1AR coverage and kind of maybe the choice to go for the other advantage was not the best choice in the 1AR as opposed to like kind of, covering the Russia-China stuff a little bit better, covering the just like warming stuff. The warming statistics are wrong or inflated arguments a little bit more. But so in a world in which there was a high risk of politics dissent, I would confidently vote neg. I don't think there's really a risk of the politics DA though. I think one place where I do disagree with Lincoln's decision is I do kind of think the NSA, the EU impact is backwards. So with your app, I kind of agree with that. I do think it's like a 2AC cross-X thing, but I did also have the argument clearly in the 1AR, so I was willing to give him credit for that claim. But to me, it's just like your app says NSA won't get reauthorized unless Obama fights it. Your SASO card, I think that the 2AR calls you out on that question, and then your internal link to the impact is just like the EU hates the NSA. So you need to have like an actual like reform passive placates the EU argument for this argument to work, but I didn't think that you really had the evidence on this. This is like kind of a late breaking development, and I might have Aaron and Egg had the 2 and R called out the 1 AR argument on this, but I don't think you did. So, and I thought the 1 AR, you know, it was like kind of based off of a CX issue. It is technically new, but which is why I think I might have, you know, allowed you to just say it was new, or at the very least, you know, you could have read a new card on this thing or 2 and R. I agree with the assessment of the link debate. And I think Lincoln's advice is good about what you need to do to make this link better. Like, all of your cards are very good, but they're all about like XM reauthorization, and it's very clear that's not what the app is. So.
Yeah, I don't have much to add. I think both sides need to be debating the other team's evidence better. So I think like the app could exploit that Wall Street Journal evidence that's from like late February. That's like the reauthorization debate that's happening now is pretty polarizing, kind of as like maybe a link thumper. I also think just generally from judging you all, you need different warming impact cards because you seem to be getting into this trouble. So I think like maybe the Roberts card that Berger has is maybe because it kind of sets like a compilation of like independent studies, kind of like the green card does for ESE and through. Okay, further, because I think the risk of warming is much lower than it should be, particularly for the quality of evidence that they are reading as defense. And same thing, like 1 AR kind of needs to pick and choose like both on politics and on case. So I think like your strategic move to like load up on like no link debate is important, but then maybe like realizing that your war defense isn't like that good, so maybe like more uniqueness cards or something like that. It's probably a better strategic move.
2 comments from you all. I thought that the 1 NC impact probably should have been different. You probably wanted an argument why sustainable NSA program is good, and maybe say these Europe arguments for the block to be like to be real turns case arguments, because I thought a lot of the 1 and R turns case arguments were like not very good. Like a sentence about nuclear war turning warming is not really a turns case argument. Failed states, etc. So maybe have like it's key to cyber programs or whatever, and then read cards that's like without it, Europe's going to abandon us, which is key to all your advantages, and that'd be a better way to do it. My perception was the Nieto dissent was better at the top level, but your impact choice was tough against this F because it was like biofuels, and your thing was about oil dependency, and you never really contested that like the just general kind of thing they had out there, which is like no one would use oil after the app because we would develop biofuel so well. So you could have like pushed back on that a little bit more, and maybe this dissent would have got more cred, or maybe have a different impact. But my perception, I don't know what the other 2 thought, was the Nieto dissent was a better at the top level, but I don't actually know that much about the relative things. I don't know if your cards were bad or you were like spinning a bunch of stuff. Not up on the mix of politics thing, but I thought the top level of that dissent seemed pretty good.
Alright, thank you. Thank you.
go to the Italian, no food for you. Well, you feel bad enough for it. When you get a night to look at that stuff, we know that there are not really good positive scenarios out there, and they get a night to look at it. Except for the Mexican politics. Going for it.
No, it's good. Like, I thought the link up is pretty good. I mean, they're just writing about something else, but I don't think that there's any better ideas out there. I think they're edible. I think it's pretty good. Like, I read it.
It was good, but it was about reauthorization.
Yeah, not about like stepping in action all this.
And regular ratification. Exclamation lobby.
Are we leaving?
Well, my feeling is we should throw stuff in the car.
So just like keep working on that stuff right now, but just
Right.
think.
If we're going to eat, we should eat now. I don't know how long we have, but are you going to eat now or? Let's see. Yeah, let's find out when this place opens up.
Thank you.
Hey, good luck.
Thank you.
Back. Let's load up the car, and then it's 10:30, and we eat at 11:30, and then hit the road to the airport.
Sure. So we just hang out here for
An hour or so.
Yeah. So we'll get
I don't think we have enough time, so let's take this up to the car.
Is this all right, Shane?
I don't think so. I don't know where. There, I will find it. Do you want to take the suitcases to the car?
Oh, yeah.
Let's just get rid of stuff.